For years, the whole story of child sponsorship has really been told through these powerful, super emotional appeals. But in a world that's just driven by data, a new question keeps popping up. How do we really know these programs are working? So today, we're going to dive into that. We're going to look at the huge shift from just relying on heartwarming stories to demanding hard scientific evidence.
I mean, this is the big one, right? It's the most important question. And for the longest time, it was surprisingly tough to answer. It kind of gets at that healthy skepticism a lot of us feel. Beyond the emotional story, what is the real, actual, measurable impact?
And this is the crucial shift we're talking about. We are moving away from relying only on individual success stories to using these really rigorous, data-driven methods that can actually prove cause and effect. It's all about accountability, and honestly, it's changing the entire nonprofit world.
Okay, so how can you be sure a program is the real reason for a child's success and not just, luck or a bunch of other factors? Well, the absolute key is creating a truly fair comparison. And to do that, researchers have what they call a gold standard.
It's called a randomized controlled trial, or an RCT for short. And if that term sounds kind of familiar, it should. It's the exact same method they use in medicine to prove if a new drug is safe and effective. It is widely considered the most reliable way to get to the truth of what works. So, how does it actually work? Well, the idea is pretty straightforward. You start with a big group of eligible children, and then, basically like a coin flip, you randomly divide them. One group gets the sponsorship. We call that the treatment group. The other group, the control group, doesn't. Then you just track them and compare them over time. Any difference you see in their outcomes, well, that can be credited directly to the program. It's a really clean, powerful way to measure true impact. But, and this is a big but, here's where the perfect ideal world of science slams right into the messy reality of fieldwork. While RCTs are the gold standard, they aren't always easy or, let's be honest, even possible to pull off. Which, of course, leads to the obvious question. If this method is so powerful, why isn't every single program on the planet evaluated this way? Well, the reasons are both really practical and, frankly, deeply ethical. And these hurdles are pretty significant. First off, you have this huge ethical question. Is it really okay to intentionally withhold help from a child who needs it just for the sake of creating a control group? It's tough. And beyond that, these trials are incredibly expensive and super complex to manage, especially since you have to run them for years and years to see the real long-term impact. So if the gold standard isn't always an option, what do? Throw up your hands? No way. This is where researchers have gotten really creative, developing some clever alternatives that find proof of impact without needing that full randomization. All right, let's start with a method called regression discontinuity design, or RDD. I know, the name is a total mouthful, but the concept behind it is absolutely brilliant. Instead of creating a random control group, it uses the program's own rules to create a kind of natural experiment. Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine there's a scholarship, right? And it's only awarded to students who score 90% or higher on a big test. This method would compare the students who scored an 89%, they just barely missed out, to those who scored a 90% and got the scholarship. Think about it. These two groups of students are almost identical in every single way, except for that one tiny point. So any difference in their success down the road can be linked directly to getting that scholarship. Pretty clever, huh? So here's the crucial point. Both of these methods are trying to do the exact same thing, create a fair comparison. RCTs do it through the pure chance of a random assignment, like a coin toss. RDDs, on the other hand, do it by cleverly focusing on the razor's edge of a program's own eligibility rules. Two different paths to the same goal. Okay, let's move on to our next clever alternative. This one's called Difference in Differences, or DID. And this approach is all about tracking and comparing changes over a period of time. The easiest way to get this one is with a little analogy. Imagine you have two identical houseplants, and they're both growing at the exact same rate. Then you start giving just one of them a special new fertilizer. Now, if that fertilizer plant suddenly starts growing way faster than the other one, the difference in their differences in growth tells you the exact impact of that fertilizer. DD just applies that exact same logic, but with communities and sponsorship programs. So we've got RCTs, RDDs, and DID. I know they might sound a bit technical, but getting a handle on them is so important because this kind of scientific rigor is what separates just wishful thinking from creating real, measurable, life-changing impact. So it really turns out there is no single best method that works for everything. You should really think of these as different tools in a toolbox. The real skill is knowing which one to pull out based on the situation, the resources you've got, and of course, those really important ethics we talked about. And when you look at them side by side like this, the trade-offs become super clear. RCTs, they give you the most reliable results, for sure, but they come with those high costs and tough ethical questions. RDDs are also really reliable, but they only work if a program has that very specific, sharp cutoff point. And DID is a great flexible option, just as long as you can find a good comparison group that was already on a pretty similar track to begin with. So what does this all mean in the real world? First, it's about picking the right tool for the job. Second, data collection can't just be an afterthought. You have to bake it in from day one. It's also so important to look beyond just the one person and measure the spillover effects on the whole community. And finally, you can innovate ethically. You can use designs like waitlists, where the control group still gets the service, they just get it a little bit later. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to this really simple, powerful truth. The goal of all this measurement, it isn't just to prove what works, it's to learn, to adapt, and to improve, so that every single dollar and every bit of effort creates the biggest possible impact it can. You know, we've made incredible progress in our ability to measure impact with real scientific precision. But that opens up an even bigger, maybe even deeper question. Now that we have all these amazing tools to measure almost anything, how do we make absolutely sure we're focusing on what truly matters for a child's long-term well-being and future? Well, that's the next frontier we've got to explore. Thanks so much for joining me.